Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today I thought I might do something a little bit different on my channel, and that is talk about some of the fan-made ports of first-person shooters that you can get on the Sega Dreamcast. Now, I've been collecting these very casually over the years, but I have enough of them that I thought it might be kind of cool to show you in a video. The cool thing is that despite these not really being official releases for the Dreamcast, they are pretty easy to get a hold of. I'm pretty sure most of these are available for download. You just have to burn the CDs yourself. Or there are Etsy or eBay sellers that print up their own copies with really cool manuals and covers, and then they sell them cheaply either online or at expos. So the first one I want to talk about is Half-Life Paranoia. And this is a really interesting one because I hadn't heard of this before. I assume that it's also available on PC, but honestly, I have never played it there. And this is a completely new single-player campaign for the original Half-Life. In this game, you play as a Russian officer in the Secret Service, and just like in Half-Life, weird stuff starts to happen. And again, I've only played the Dreamcast version, so I'm not sure how complete this is, but on this disc, there are 3 levels, including a training mission, and I guess it's based on real-life Russian architecture. That's interesting. When I was doing some research on this and trying to figure out the history and the origins of it, I was surprised to learn it was originally scheduled to have an actual retail release by Sierra Online. Now, this was around 2000, and I guess Sierra just assumed that Dreamcast sales weren't that great. And to be honest, I was gone by then, but I thought that was pretty cool, and it definitely goes a long way to explain why it's so polished. And as you can see from this footage, it runs pretty well. I mean, again, this was gonna be a retail release. I don't think it actually got to a full final, like, gold master, but yeah, it looks and runs really well. I will say though, I've played the original port of Half-Life on the Dreamcast, and this game suffers from a similar problem with that as well, and that is that there are just a bunch of little load screens that happen as you're playing. Now, that obviously happened in the original Half-Life, but on the Dreamcast, it's even worse. I suspect it's just because a Dreamcast, isn't a full PC. It has less resources, less RAM to actually run the game. And I know some of you are probably wondering why this game looks so good in this video. Well, remember that heavily modified Dreamcast that I talked about a couple months ago? Well, that's what I'm using for the video capture here. So technically it's VGA out, and then it's got an upscaler to 1080p, and that's the reason why the graphics and textures look so sharp. Another limitation of the Dreamcast is going to be the controls. Specifically, the Dreamcast controller only has the left analog stick, and when you're playing first-person shooters, you really would want both. So this game basically forces you to use the 4 face buttons to move, and then the left analog stick is to look around. It's very similar to what developers did when they made first-person shooters on the PSP. It's not the greatest control method, but as you can see here, it works. So yeah, here is Half-Life Paranoia running on the Dreamcast. Again, not a perfect port, but it is really cool to see running on it, and it's very playable. All right, the next port I want to show you is the Doom Collection, and this was given to me by my buddy Jared. He basically makes these up to sell at expos. Like if you were to go down to Phoenix Expo, he'll have a little booth there and he'll sell them for very cheap. But he takes a lot of pride in it because it's a fantastic kind of fan-made version of all these Doom collections in a physical format. You can see here that the manual actually is a really nice manual. And this comes with a bunch of versions of games that are using the Doom engine, using different mods and also spin-offs. Not surprisingly, you can see that this runs, in my mind, very well. I would say maybe it's not as smooth as, say, a modern PC, but it is a good port. And the controls work a little bit better than, say, in Half-Life here because of the way those games are designed. So, for instance, in this, you're really using the left and right triggers on the Dreamcast controller to do strafing, so it does feel very natural. Another game I had to check out here is the original Wolfenstein 3D. Again, runs really well. I remember playing this game back in the day. I think my buddy had like a 386-25, maybe a 16 megahertz computer, and yeah, it was pretty awesome back in the day. We were blown away by it, and I still actually like playing the game today. Although you do forget about that head bopping, you know, when you're moving around. It's funny how this game used to emulate your head. And yeah, thankfully we don't have to mess around with that anymore in first-person shooters, or at least not as bad. Also on this disc, I was checking out some of the other modded versions of the game, and I had to check out this Batman mod here. This is so weird. I'm not sure. I mean, basically this is just a fan-made mod, swapping out textures and stuff like that. But yeah, you're basically playing as Batman. Although I did notice that you do feel kind of short. Like, I don't know what it is with the scale. I don't know if it was an option that I screwed up or something like that, but he definitely seems like it's like a short Batman. I mean, am I crazy? And then here is Counter-Strike ported over to the Dreamcast. Now, it's advertised that this has all the same levels that were included with the original game. I can't verify that because I have to admit that I didn't play the original Counter-Strike back in the day. Honestly, most of my first-person shooters were single-player games, and I never really got into this, you know, competitive online versions of Half-Life and stuff like that. So, but they say they're all here. And despite being mostly known as a multiplayer game, for whatever reason, this fan-made version of it does not support online multiplayer. I guess it's probably just split screen. And as you can see by the footage here, it does run pretty well. And again, like Half-Life Paranoia, it is running at a fairly high resolution too. Although I noticed that there are some stuttering when you first walk into new areas. Now, I suspect it's because it's either loading level geometry or maybe textures, but I noticed that once it's done that for the first time, then it continues to run pretty smoothly. I think the problem that I have both with the Half-Life Paranoia game and also Counter-Strike is the controls. Specifically using the Dreamcast controller, the aiming just does not feel right. Now, I should mention though that this will also support the keyboard and mouse, which is pretty cool. I didn't test it because, well, I just didn't want to have to hook it up. But it says in the manual that it'll work with it. And here is Rise of the Triad, Dark War. And this is another one that was created by my buddy Jared. And you'll see here that the manual, just like the other one, is fantastic. It's cool because it has a bunch of information about the different enemies, the different characters, your weapons, the bosses. It also has a little bit of information about the game itself and the port. So as a collector, that's a pretty cool little bonus to have. And as many of you already know, Rise of the Triad was originally designed to be the follow-up to Wolfenstein 3D, but I guess it just kept growing in its design documents and it basically just became its own full game. What's cool about a lot of the games in this video is that eventually the developer and publisher decided to just make the original source code available to the public. So, for instance, with Rise of the Triad, well, back in 2002, they made it so that anybody could download the game and, you know, do these kind of ports. And as you can see, the game runs and plays really well. Like most of the games in this video, your enjoyment of running these kind of first-person shooters on the Dreamcast is really going to come down to how well you like using that Dreamcast controller on a first-person shooter. I just wish there was a second analog stick. Alright guys, well, let's a quick look at some of the fan-made first-person shooter ports that you can get for the Sega Dreamcast. And like I mentioned previously, you don't actually have to buy these from somebody online. In most cases, you can go and just download the ISO and then burn it yourself. But I do like how people are manufacturing these for, say, expos and little one-offs that have the artwork on the CD, that do really high-quality manuals. It looks really great in the game collection. And I suspect this video is nowhere near complete, so if I'm missing some, please post a comment down in the video description below. Also, let me know if you like this video, because I can do another one on some of the fan-ported adventure games that come out on Dreamcast. Some of them that run the Scum VM. Some of those LucasArts and Sierra adventure games running on the Dreamcast. Might be a pretty cool video to do. Alright guys, well thank you very much for watching, thank you for subscribing, and take care.